Hey, fight fans, welcome back to the CES podcast here on the CES website and social media. I'm Pat Sullivan, the Director of Operations for Team CES, joined as always by my partner, Steve Mays. And today we welcome the very special guest. He's the president of the World Boxing Council. That's right, the WBC, Mauricio Sulaiman. Mauricio, thank you so much for joining the program today.
Thank you so very much. It's an honor for me. I'm very excited, and it's very, very important to do these type of things right now, to be close to the boxing family of the world. And I cannot thank you enough for considering me.
Yeah, thank you. And I, as a podcaster, we always try to get the best background we can to keep people interested while we're talking. And I get my bobbleheads and football helmets, but nothing beats your background with all the green belts, because anybody who follows boxing knows that you're not a true champion unless you have the green belt around your waist. So that is awesome to have that behind you.
That's definitely the best. That's definitely the best background we've had so far.
Thank you. And in fact, these are all original belts. This is very rare. It's the black one. You know, when boxing, the belts were not used for many years. The boxer used to receive a trophy, or
right.
It was not a regular practice. Then when the belt was introduced, if someone lost the title, they would take that belt and they give it to the new one.
Right.
And the boxer who was a champion got left with nothing. Today is different. Every fighter who wins a title, they get the belt, they get to keep it. But this is my favorite wall in my house.
Yeah, I know that's a great piece of history right behind you. And let's talk about the history of your starting the WBC. You grew up around some of the greatest fighters of all time, Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, and some of the greats that the WBC ever were able to put those belts around their waist. And the reason why is because your father, Jose, was the president of the WBC throughout, you growing up. And then when your father, the late and great Jose, passed away, you took over as the president of WBC. So you could kind of bring us through a little bit of your history and how you got started and where you are today.
Well, my first memory from boxing goes back when I was 2 or 3 years old. I don't remember. And I was home and I was upstairs and I heard a loud noise, something I never heard before. So I got very curious. I went downstairs running, only to find in my living room my father with 2 huge men. And I was just looking up. Eventually, I found out, and then I knew those 2 were Don King and Muhammad Ali.
Wow.
So my house was always the hub. My father decided to take on as president 1975, but he conditioned the WBC that he would only take the position if he was given full authority to change the boxing world. Mm-hmm. And to do that, he took the WBC, he studied business management. So he took the WBC and recreated the structure like a business. So he had committees, he had all type of different departments that could attend the different priorities. And the first priority was health. Mm-hmm. That's why the WBC changed from 15 to 12 rounds, and so many changes in rules. But that was my first experience in life. And I always saw at home Sugar Ray Leonard, Oscar de la Hoya, Hagler, Kearns, Duran, Chavez, Larry Holmes. Our house was the open house for everyone.
Sure.
My father used to do the meetings there. He used to do all the reunions. The house was the open for everyone. So it was a very interesting childhood.
Yeah.
I was a boxing fan, and I know there's still some boxing fan inside of me, but it's a different scenario. When you have a responsibility, you have to be absolutely focused, and you cannot lean to one side. You cannot have a preference for your champion against your challenger. That challenger has the same dream of conquering the green and gold, the same dream of changing his life,
right,
his family. So it's a very fun position to be in.
Yeah, and it sounds like that was quite the living room to grow up and have in your household. And if we always say if those walls could talk, but imagine the stories that came out of that living room. And I can only imagine if this was nowadays when we have Zoom and all these cameras and everything else, what could have been captured in there would have been. You talk about The Last Dance being a great documentary. Imagine if we had one of the living room conversations between your father Jose and those boxers. That would have been really cool. But something that you touch on about the WBC and how you're always evolving and growing. Right now, not just boxing, not just WBC, but everybody in the world is facing this pandemic with what's going on, and it's changing every business across the entire world. Certainly impacted boxing pretty well. We haven't been able as a sport to have any live fights in quite some time. The UFC just did a couple of shows down in Florida. So I know boxing's trying to get into some more, we could do something live again, but the WBC is doing something that seems really transcending and something that I think no one else is talking about, but I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on, and that's having your judges score the fights from home. Because when we watched the UFC fight, there were judges that were there live, but something I thought was a little funny is that there's no fans. So the fighters all said they could hear the commentators talking. So the judges can obviously hear the commentators talking, whether that impacts a judge or not. But if you can talk a little bit about what your ideas are of judges scoring from home and how that would work for a WBC boxing championship fight.
Sure. We have a system that has been working for 2 years. It's a evaluation system of ring officials. So this was built. We select fights.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, Wilder Fury was the last one that we did under this system. We had 8 judges judging from home.
Okay.
Of course, not official. It's just a training and evaluating tool.
Right.
We did many fights in these 2 years. And what we do, we take those scores and evaluate how they did from scoring and compare to the official scorings. And that's just a tool that we have. When you are going back to boxing without public, it's a very limited atmosphere.
Right.
The less persons that are in that room, in that TV studio, in that arena, in that gymnasium, the better.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying to the fighters, okay, instead of 4, you can bring 1 or 2. They're saying to the boxing commission, instead of 30 commissioners, you bring only the essential persons that have to be there. So we put in the protocol the option of having remote scoring of judges. That way you take 3 out of the equation.
Yeah.
To do a fight, they're talking about 20, 30 persons.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about 10% reduction because every person in that place has to be tested, has to be structured in some way. It takes a work for that person to be there, regardless of what he's going to be doing. And that has led to great interest in some areas. Some people are concerned. The traditionalists say, oh, no, you have to be there, blah, 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 blah. But let me just tell you very simple. What is it that millions of fans see and what do they go by to score a fight? The television.
Right. Yep.
What is it that the 3 judges see? You have 3 judges right there in the action, but they're looking up, okay? And that has been always the topic of discussion.
Right.
The position of the judge is not the perfect one because you're looking up and there's things that are complicated.
Yeah, you might be looking at the back of a fighter, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have 1 judge in each side. So each of those 3 persons are looking at a complete different side of sometimes they see everything. If they are on the one side that they all can 3, they all 3 can see, then it's okay. Many times you have the fighters here, then the referee. So what is it that we are scoring in reality? I am not meaning to go and finalize the judges at ringside. Right. It is just a topic that is out there. It's a possibility that can be used at this time. And I'm sure it can lead to other different things because there have been so many controversial decisions.
Right.
Officiating will always be a problem. But if we can do something and take this opportunity and be proactive and innovative, I'm all for it. So we're working very hard on trying to see if this can be something that could add to this new era in the world that we're all gonna experience.
Now, in those fights, Mauricio, were the judges, were their scores similar to the ones who were there live, or did they have any problems? Because I'm assuming there's no audio in what they're watching. Probably just is it the same stream that you're watching at home, or similar? You know, how did their scoring compare to what was live?
The experience has been very, very positive. The challenge here, of course, the perfect world would be that the promoter or the TV company gives that official a clean feed with international sound without commentary, without graphics.
Yep.
That way you are watching the screen. That's a challenge because it involves technology and investment. It could be done through internet, but then you get into internet connection and speed and all these things. We are considering everything. We're playing around with this, putting a lot of effort and resources, because this can lead to something that is viable. But yes, the idea is to have clean feed with certain characteristics, so the official at home can really judge. The experience has been very good. This app, they put the scoring immediately, and it gets to the central, which, let's say I am the supervisor. Instead of collecting the cards from the referee, from the judges, I just get it in my laptop, and that's the scores coming from everywhere. And also, this can lead to have more than 3 judges. The more judges that you have evaluating an event, the less probability of a controversy. Because if 7 people are watching the fight, 5 saw one win, 2 saw the other, it's very powerful saying that the 5 are outpointed the other 2. So it's just something that we are putting attention and trying to develop.
I think that's great. You know, you seem to be ahead of the curve with this. You know, this isn't something that you just started doing because of the pandemic. You talked about you've been doing it for 2 years. And it's great listening to you explain it, because you start thinking about more judges, and you know, like you said, if you have 7 people judging and 5 people see somebody winning, there's a lot less of the controversy. And your dad was obviously way ahead of the curve with health and regulations and stuff like that. You know, is boxing 24/7 for you? Is it all day, every day? You grew up in it. You know, your dad was one of the most influential and powerful people in boxing, and now you sitting in the seat of the WBC, which is the most powerful sanctioning body. Is boxing what you do all day, every day? It's what you think about every single day?
Yes, it is. I grew up, my father was always my hero, my God. We're 6 siblings. I was the 5th one, and then my sister. And for some reason, my father took me as the favorite. So I would go with him to the fights, to the press conferences, everywhere. And I went to school and studied the same as my father. I always wanted to be what he was. So when I graduated from MBA, business administration, I went directly to be the CEO of our manufacturing company. The family owns a manufacturing company of medical supplies, paper charts, gel, many other things that we have. So I was there for the company and gave my father the time away. Instead of him having to be in the company, I put my efforts to let him go out and dedicate 100% of his time to boxing. And in the meantime, I was helping him with some things in boxing. When he passed away, you know, he went through cancer and he went through a few difficulties before his passing. Those times I got more involved in the WBC to support him as well. So when he passed away, my immediate thought was that my role in boxing was finished, because I was only to be with my father. And my mom and my wife, when we saw the funeral days, the people coming from all over the world, so many demonstration of love for my father and what the WBC meant for the world and for my father, my mom just said, you should not abandon the organization. You should stay in your position as general secretary or take some committees, do whatever, but you cannot just leave the WBC.
Right.
That's what happened. A month later, there was a meeting by the Board of Governors, and I was nominated and elected as president. And that's where I am right now. I had to leave the company because there is absolutely impossible to deal with the WBC and do other things. So I dedicate 24/7.
That's an unbelievable story, and I hope a lot of people know that story, because it's amazing to hear something like that about how, you know, you're walking in your dad's footsteps, and it's you know that he knows that you're doing it for him, and that's amazing. Is there any fighter that you had growing up, not now, not as the man who sits in charge, but as a kid, when dad would say, you know, so and so is fighting next week, who was your favorite fighter? Who did you always want to watch? You couldn't wait to see them fight as a kid growing up.
Okay, my first hero was Mantequilla Nápoles. I was just crazy about Nápoles. He lost and retired when I was 5 years old. So that tells you the magnitude of interest I had in boxing. I would go to school and I would, you know, all the kids would be playing football or soccer. And I would go and play boxing, shadow boxing, and punch myself and pretend I'm in a fight. I wanted to be a fighter. And my father took me to watch Mantequilla Nápoles against Muñiz in Acapulco. I was 4 years old. So after the fight, it was a very bloody fight. I went with my father to the dressing room. He says, do you want to see your hero, Mantequilla? I said, of course. So when I walk in and I see Nápoles in a bed with both eyes completely shut, both eyebrows completely open.
Wow.
And I was just like that. It was 14 rounds. It was a very bloody fight. I look at him. I get out of the room with my father and I just turned to him and said, Daddy, I think I want to be a fireman. No more boxing. that was it. So after Nápoles, Carlos Zárate, he was my hero. He was just a tremendous fighter. But I always used to go to my father and ask him for names of fighters so I can go and play myself. Me, I would be like Zárate and Campanella and this and that. So I would ask him names. My greatest hero as a fan, Sugar Ray Leonard. That was it. I mean, when Sugar Ray entered I don't know, I think I saw his fight against the Hawk Andy Price. And that fight just blew up my mind. It was unbelievable. And from there, Sugar Ray became my greatest hero. Then, of course, I had Chavez and Tyson were very special in that era. But that's when I started getting more into the WBC and turned into following and being a fan and having to do the work for every fighter and the appreciation, because you cannot lean. Your champion is your champion, but then that challenger. And I used to ask my father, am I talking too much? Is that okay?
No, keep going. Please keep going.
I used to see my father and ask him, because boxing is brutal. It's so dramatic. The emotions are very powerful because you get to know the fighters, the stories behind what they have gone through, what that fight means if they become champions. And I used to see my father, and I used to ask him, what do you feel when that fight is over? And how can you go to the champion and be happy? And then I see you with a fighter who lost,
Right.
And you are very empathetic. So he gave me a great explanation, and with his actions, he showed me, you feel great happiness for the winner, sincere happiness. He's a new champion, or he defended his championship. And then you feel completely support and understanding and pride for the loser, sincerely. So he always told me, you go into the ring, the first thing you do, you go with the fighter who lost. And you comfort him, you say words that you know what you have to say at that moment. And then you go congratulate and celebrate genuinely with the winner and the champion. So it's a compromise, and there's no hypocrisy. And when a new champion is crowned, regardless, he's your new champion. And you have to be very proud. Tyson Fury against Wilder. Wilder, 5 years as WBC champion. We went through many things together because he was the victim of the clean boxing program. Several of his fights were canceled because of doping. And we went to see the Pope together. So wow. A real friendship. And he lost. So you get in that ring, you talk to him, and then you go to Fury and celebrate his great championship win, and he's your champion. So it's a balance, very complicated to develop, but once you understand it, then it's natural.
That's awesome.
So two things I just took from that. The first is that even after going to see the Pope, you can still lose a boxing fight, which I kind of figured seeing him and getting his blessing would kind of get you past that decision card. But I guess
it worked for Rocky.
It did work for Rocky. So I want to also talk to you about some of the fighters you just mentioned. First, Sugar Ray Leonard. I think that was great. You mentioned that he was one of your heroes growing up watching box. And I think even more so than what he's done in boxing, what he's doing now with his speaking and his book, and coming out and talking about some of his battles that he's had outside the boxing ring. I think he's helping way more people than he was able to influence as a boxer, which I think is incredible. And I'm really proud that Sugar Ray took that step. But I want to talk to you about another champion that you just mentioned, and that's former WBC champion Iron Mike Tyson, who there's been a lot of stories coming out about him potentially making a comeback in his 50s. And we've all seen the side-by-side pictures of what he looked like in December, what he looks like now. He certainly looks like he's getting into shape for a fight. Whether he fights or not, that seems to be unseen so far. But what I want to talk to you about was your comments about Mike Tyson coming back and how it's supported by the WBC because Mike Tyson was the champion of WBC for a long time, and he's an icon for the sport. And I think you said he was an icon for the WBC, which I totally agree with. But is this something that can be good for boxing, or how do you view this? Because I'm sure if I gave you a list of fighters when you took over the president of WBC, Mike Tyson would be on probably the bottom of the list of guys that you thought you would ever see back in the ring.
Well, first of all, it's great for boxing. Mm-hmm. Just look at the Instagram numbers.
Sure.
Of a 10-second clip of him punching the trainer. The trainer meets. Millions of people watching and commenting and getting excited. So that is great for boxing. To have
sure.
boxing being the vehicle to bring a human being from complications, from depression, mm-hmm. from obesity, to what Mike Tyson is today, happy, enthused, very well in shape. That's great for boxing. The WBC will 100% support his actions because he's planning to do an exhibition.
Right.
And for charity. So anyone who would attempt to get in the way would be completely not understandable. Why would someone get in the way?
Right.
Mike Tyson is doing full medicals.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to show that this is nothing but giving back to the sport. Boxing made him, and he was the youngest ever to capture the heavyweight championship. So people are thinking now maybe he will be the oldest to capture the heavyweight championship. So let's have fun with it. Why cut a dream? Why cut an illusion?
Right.
Let's see him back and doing exhibitions. That's going to be good. It's going to be create money for charity, for so many people in need. It's going to shape him up, and it's going to bring millions of eyeballs to our sport. So I choose not to battle, but to the contrary, fully support Mike Tyson, and whatever he does, you never know. He might come back, then do a fight, and then win the title. You never know.
Hey, the green belt could be a hell of a motivator for a lot of people, especially someone who once had it around their waist. So I guess you never know where that could lead Mike Tyson again. But something I wanted to talk to you about is fighters that are currently fighting right now that may be ranked or maybe looking at the rankings. And, I think that Mike Tyson's a perfect example. He was the youngest WBC champion for a reason, because he took a lot of tough fights getting to that point. And when we do these podcasts, I always try to think of something that the fighters who are watching at home can take from this. And I think this is something that's very important, because there's two different paths, it seems, that both boxers and MMA fighters take in both sports. And one path is you get to a certain point in your career, and then you take the toughest fights you can get. And you may not go undefeated, because it's very hard to go undefeated in either sport. But you take those tough fights so that when you get to fight for a world title, you're battle tested. Then there's the other route where fighters tend to not fight athletes that are on their same level. And they get to a certain point that once they fight these guys who shouldn't even be in the same level as them, when they step up in competition, they're not ready. And they can either get hurt or they can lose and suffer a big setback. So I know there's no ideal path to get from an amateur to a green belt. But what I want to ask you is, if you could kind of break down the best way for a fighter to get to a point where they're recognized by the WBC, because I'm sure going 10-0 fighting guys who don't have wins on their record isn't going to get them on their radar, but maybe going 8-2 with those, 4 or 5 of those fights coming against some elite fighters could certainly get them on your radar.
Fighters are warriors. They are the heart that someone has just to go in the ring. It's something unique, very special. I believe that it's the management and the promoters who are the ones who take a different path for the fighter. The fighter is willing to fight anyone they put in front of him. So there's a tendency to say exactly what you just point out. You have a fighter, good looking, good social media, then he gets wins and wins and wins against probably low level opposition. So that's a product. And what they want to do is capitalize on a product as fast as possible. Unfortunately, now there are many options. The championships are fragmented so much that before, the level of challengers was much more important because there were fewer champions. And then there are challengers that are trying to get to the championship. But now with so many opportunities, then you see fighters having opportunities to go other ways with less level that they should to fight for a world championship. What I would tell every fighter is set your mind into your dream. This behind me is the dream of any fighter in the world, the green and gold, and the path is going to be difficult. So if you want to go through the WBC path, it's going to take challenges, it's going to take difficulty, it's going to take time, but the reward is very, very special. Once you are a WBC champion, you are a WBC champion for life. Once you're a WBC boxer, before, during, and after the glory days, you are part of this family. We care for you as a fighter. We do many things outside the ring, beyond the ring, for the fighters, before, during, and after the championship years. This is not a popularity contest. We have to do things that are not popular at times, but what we can guarantee is seriousness, honorability, and greatness. So if you're a fighter out there and you're looking for the green belt, keep working hard, keep proving yourself, and just understand that everything is possible.
So the last two guests that we had, and this is the last thing I have, the last two guests we had, we asked them, they're commissioners, and we asked them what their most memorable fight or most memorable moment was as commissioners. I have to ask you the same question. As being the head of the WBC, the president of the most elite sanctioned body in boxing, since being the president, what is your most memorable moment or fight to this day?
That's a very tough one. You know, the first fights that I attended as president were very difficult because my father was completely there, and I felt very sad every moment. And a lot of people comfort me, and they would come and say beautiful words. To pin down one fight in this era as president of the WBC, it's not easy. I was very impressed. I had never been to the UK to see a boxing event. Never went to a fight. And when I was there, I was so impressed. He was Gennady Golovkin against, what's his name? I forgot his name. But the energy, the crowd, the fans in the UK, they know about boxing. They have, they buy the magazines. They learn, they read, they know, and they're very enthusiastic. But I would say this when Sean Porter fought Errol Spence.
Yep.
I think that's a moment that I really enjoyed. Great, high quality fight, two great fighters giving their best at their peak. That's one of my favorite fights that I can think right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, great stuff. And we really appreciate you being here on this call with us today. And one more thing before we go, there's two fighters right now at CES that are WBC Youth Champions, Jermaine Ortiz and Irvin Gonzalez, and they both won their titles pretty recently. So they have the youth green belt around their waist. And I think it's something that means a lot for their career, but it means a lot for how fast they got to that point in their career as well. So they obviously had great amateur backgrounds to get there, but it also gets them ready to climb those rankings. So, you know, we have a lot of CES supporters who watch this podcast who are watching at home, and they know Ortiz and Gonzalez as WBC Youth Champions. But if you could explain to our listeners exactly what that prestige means and what it means if you're a fighter to have that belt so young in your career.
Well, that's the WBC platform which was created. We believe in supporting boxing at all levels. The Youth Championship was created in 1999. It's a world championship for youth. So it has a specific rules. It's a 10-round competition, etc., age. But to be a WBC Youth Champion is the greatest step that you can have. 200 fighters have won world championships after being youth champion. Danny Garcia was a youth champion.
Wow.
Canelo Alvarez, Julio Cesar Chavez, Eric Morales. So many great champions went from that process. What I can say, they are in the best hands. Jimmy Birchfield is one of the nicest promoters that any fighter could dream to be associated with. He is a person that cares. He's hardworking. He's very loyal. And you're in great hands. Just keep working hard. Trust him and let him do his work. And one day the opportunity will be there. But if you think that it's going to be easy, then you have to change the sport or play video games. For a boxer to be successful, you have to sacrifice, wake up, run, and then run more, and then train more, and keep a healthy life. Stay away from drugs, stay away from bad influence, from bad friends. It's a big, big sacrifice.
Sure.
It's a change of life from being with friends, but you have to change and go into a gym, and that has to be your route.
So true. So true.
And Mauricio, I'm glad you brought up Mr. Birchfield, because we actually have a very special message from one of your biggest fans and one of your friends, Mr. Jimmy Birchfield, that he wanted to deliver today.
Look.
Good morning, Mauricio. I miss you. First of all, I hope that you, your family, and loved ones, and everyone at the WBC are good and healthy. We got to challenge this coronavirus. We got to come up with the biggest knockout punch ever so we can get back in boxing, and we will all together. Mauricio, your dad is smiling from heaven this morning as you continue his legacy. He's so proud of you, as we all are. Keep up the great work. We love you very much, and we need your true leadership more than ever right now. God bless you. Uncle Jim loves you.
Wow, 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 wow. Thank you so much. That made my coronavirus process. That message is lovely. I love him. Love Uncle Jim.
Yeah,
Thank you.
He had a nice picture on his desk of him and your father, Jose.
Yes, yes.
Well,
thank you so much. And please, I'm going to give him a call and just tell him that I love him and all that he represents. And he will have the WBC in his corner forever.
Yeah, thank you, Mauricio. I appreciate those messages, and I'll relay them to Mr. Birchfield. I'm sure I'll be happy to receive your call later. But we really appreciate you joining us here on the call today. Look forward more than ever to get boxing going on again, and whether it's with remote judges, whether it's with limited fans in the stands, if any at all, we just need boxing back in our lives. And this was a nice little taste of boxing to talk about the squared circle with you again, and hopefully this was a nice distraction for everybody at home who's dealing with the stress and the distractions of the coronavirus. Hopefully this was able to get them to smile and think about boxing again. So we really appreciate your time.
Thank you so very much. God bless, and stay active. Keep your mental health clean, and we'll get through this. It's going to be a great new life for everyone. Thank you so much.
For everybody watching at home, I'm Pat Sullivan. My broadcast partner is always Steve Mays. And for the producer, Nick Heiler, thank you all for joining into the CES podcast. We'll see you next week.